All right, so with the assignment, federalism, just want to go through delegated, reserved, and concurrent powers. So here's how it looked. Pretty easy. Obviously, the middle one's concurrent, shared, right? Yeah. And I just wanted to go through this with you guys so we are all on the same page. Some of you had to edit it maybe on slides or Canva or write it out. Sorry. I guess I got to get a better form for it. Anyway, let's go through delegated powers. So, what are some delegated powers? What are delegated powers? Libby, go ahead. Awesome. Good job. So, any of the three that we talked about when it came to expressed, when it came to implied or inherent powers, you could have just listed examples of those three. Okay. So, immigration, right? You said about coining money, controlling the military, maintaining armed forces, right? These are all powers here that falls under the national government. There's a lot more, obviously, and you could have wrote a lot more if you'd like, but those are some good examples. Okay. Taxation obviously is another one that you can put in there. Good. All right. What about powers reserved for the states? What are some reserved powers? Hayden, go ahead. Yeah, good job. Good, good. So big one too, education, right? So if you didn't have education, put that down. Right now, especially when it comes to current events, the Department of Ed, President Trump's looking to cut it, right? They're kind of cut down to half of their force now. And we'll see where that goes. But his whole argument is saying, hey, the state should have full reins, full power of this, which it is a reserve power, but there is a Department of Ed, which is a national bureaucracy and organization. Okay. And more or less, he's saying, since this has been created, our scores have been down. And I think the states, the local government should have a little bit of better handling of this when it comes to certain policies that they need, when it comes to certain ideas that they need, how education can fit and work for the local entity, the state level, rather than the national government just throwing things at the states. Does that make sense? So that's one big one. When it came to licensing, marriage, divorce, right? Those are all right there in reserve powers, right? So those are all good examples. Good job, right? You said about interstate relations. That's perfect. So when it comes to businesses, certain policies devoted towards certain businesses. All right, good example of that. You guys know Disney World. Yeah, Disney World. Okay. Florida actually gives them a kind of like a tax break in a way, and like they pretty much set up and establish a board which is designed as like their mini jurisdiction, so they can kind of do as they please depending on when it comes to certain policies, because there's such a big organization, such a big company that brings more businesses in, more people in. They kind of give them a little bit of a incentive for such a large operation, right? But actually, 2 years ago, there's some butting of heads of certain viewpoints and ideologies that Disney was throwing in their movies, and the state of Florida wasn't too happy about it. So they said, hey, we might actually take this special privilege away from you. So there are some companies that are massive, that are huge, that have certain leeways when it comes to taxation, when it comes to operation within that said state. So that's interesting. You think about California, right? Silicon Valley, right? A lot of those big tech businesses, they get tax incentives for being there because they're innovating a lot of these new forms of technology, like Apple. Apple's a big one, good example. Google, big one, great example, right? Anyway, good. What about the middle here? Concurrent powers. What are shared powers between the two? Katie, what do you got? Good, good, good. Yeah, so these are all taxation's definitely a big one. Hate to hear that word, but yeah, yeah. When it comes to roads, interstate highways, yeah. Those are all good examples. All right, here we go. Here we go. So what you're supposed to do then is really just describe, talk about why federalism is important, right? Detail having delegated reserve concurrence are beneficial for working of the United States. Oh, what do you write down here? Someone like to share? What do you write down here for your response? Olivia, what do you write for your response? Uh, just tell me why it's important, federalism. Awesome. Good job. Good. So yeah, it makes life a little bit easier, especially for the national government, where the states obviously know their population better than the national government, right? All these states are different when it comes to their environment, their climate, the business that's there, the people that's there, right? So they are the ones that should have a little bit more say in what goes on. But the national government should have said powers to help benefit the states whenever they need help, protecting them from an invasion, sure, whatever have you, right? But at the same time, the states should make decisions that benefit their population because let's face it, every state has their own set of problems, different problems than others, right? I know we talked about immigration, just use that as an example, right? A lot of these southern states along the border, right? Obviously, their immigration policies, when it comes to their defense of this, is going to look a lot different than states that are inland or let's say north, right? So, just on immigration alone, policies are different. Business policies are different. I just gave that example about Disney, gave that example about Silicon Valley, right? There's so many differences here when it comes to the state, local, and national level where maybe we should leave it up to certain entities here to decide how they're going to handle some of these issues, some of these problems. And yeah, and federalism allows for that balance. Big thing with politics is, well, the national government, let's say with the president of the United States, okay, it could lean in one party's direction. Okay. Maybe you're not a big fan of whoever the president of the United States, let's say Trump. Let's say you're not a big fan. Well, it gives you the opportunity in your state elections to elect a governor that might represent your political party. Or maybe you're okay with them. You want to keep going along those party lines. Fine. Right. Then it breaks down even further when you think about, let's say, a supervisor or anything about a mayor, right? Your state representative, your senator, right? There's so many things here that you can obviously lay out, elect through policy means that balances the power, right? So right now, when it comes to the House, the Senate, the president, well, they're all part of the Republican Party right now, right? The majorities are in the House and Senate for the Republican Party. Right? A lot of people might not be happy with it, but in their said state, their population kind of shows through voting, right, which way and direction they'd like to see. So that's how federalism is very beneficial. You guys got it? You got that? Yeah? Yeah, you good? All right. Okay. Okay, here we go. Here we go. So moving on. Here are your terms for today. Let's see. Let's see. Actually, it's just enabling act. All right, now listen. Whenever you put up enabling act, it's probably going to bring the one up 1934 with Adolf Hitler. I'm not looking for that one. I'm looking for the one for the state admission process. So, state admission process. Who? Huh? Yeah. It was good. Yeah, it was a good time. There's a lot of I mean the competition was pretty much even. There's so many close matches. The heavyweight match, I don't know if you heard about that one. Big upset. Might be the biggest upset of all time. The guy from Minnesota came back. So he won the Olympics a few years ago and he had an extra year of eligibility. But in this break, he wrestled in the WWE. He tried out for the Buffalo Bills and he came back for this last year and he pretty much beat everybody's butt leading up to this point. And then in the finals, he lost. Last like 20 seconds. So it was nuts. President Trump was actually there. Elon Musk was there. It was kind of wild. Yeah. All right, guys. So real quick, I just want to talk about the state admission process, and that's it. That's it. So as we're done with this, we'll just move on. Tomorrow, I want to talk about territories, right? And some of the conflicts here that people might have with certain territories, maybe the rights that, you know, uh, and when it comes to representation. And it always brings up this topic of debate with Puerto Rico and even Washington, D.C., talking about statehood. Well, I don't know about that, but never know, I guess. And now all of a sudden you're in the the news about Canada? What? I don't know about that one either. That's pretty wild and unimaginable. But well, how many states do we have? How many states do we got here? Yari? 50. Good. All right. What did we start off with? How many colonies do we have that turned to states? 13. Good. So guess what? That admission process happened like that because, well, they're just there. They're already there. And then as this expansion occurred, as these territories were forming, they all had to go through this state admission process. All right. Today we'll talk about some interesting facts, which I'd like you to write down, where certain territories, certain lands will just become states a little bit easier than some. Anyway, how does it work? So, number one, territory asks for admission. So, plain and simple, the people living in the U.S. territory, right, land controlled by the United States, but not a state, ask Congress to become a state. So they have a referendum. Do you guys know what I mean by that? It's a vote. It's like, hey, here's a referendum. We're going to have a vote to see if we want to join the United States. So these territories all do that, number one, right? And they ask U.S. to become a state. Puerto Rico, believe it or not, right? Which a lot of people argue and say, hey, Puerto Rico should be a state. They have a referendum every so often, and they all choose, well, not all, but majority chooses not to become a state. They're fine being a territory. They don't want to be a state. A lot of it because I guess they don't want the extra baggage. Is there a lot of baggage here? Yeah, there might be. So they're like, we're good being a territory. We don't need, to be a part of the United States as an actual state. All right. Number two, state receives enabling act. So in other words, Congress tells the state, hey, you got to write a constitution, right? You got to create a state constitution. And through that enabling act, right, which is them writing this constitution, it has to align with the US Constitution because you need it cohesive. You guys know what I mean by that? You guys need it. It needs to be very similar to what the US Constitution is all about. If it's different, if it's maybe off the line a bit, then the US government can look at it and say, hey, change this up. We don't really like it. Once you change it, then we'll add you in, which actually happened in Arizona, believe it or not. So that happens next. All right. So three, the territory creates a state constitution, which that means they have a state government, right? And this is something aligned that needs to be aligned with the U.S. Constitution. So, in other words, one of the biggest things here too with their constitution is that it needs to be a Republican form of government. So, meaning where people elect their leaders, right? Okay, so the state has to have that power, have that obligation, and that ability for its people. All right, then Congress reviews it. All right, they review it and they look at it and say, okay, well, they follow the U.S. Constitution and keep that very similar. Right, they have a Republican form of government and they have a state government. Well, going to be a state government that is cohesive with the United States government that follows pretty much the same line. That's what it means by a Republican form of government. And through that, well, Congress approves of it, right? So after Congress approves of this admission, the president signs off on it, and well, they become a new state, right? So were the last two states that were added, you guys know? Happened right around the same time. Go ahead, Caden. No, not the last one, not the last two, but we'll talk about Texas here.
Oh,
Yeah, Hawaii and Alaska. Good job. So these were territories, obviously, of the United States, dating back in the 1800s. And obviously, we know Hawaii with Pearl Harbor, right? And then Alaska was actually purchased right around the end of the Civil War. And a lot of people are like, Alaska? Why do we get Alaska as a territory? All it's up there is ice, snow, and nothing. Well, there's actually a lot that Alaska offers, especially with military bases. I don't know if you guys noticed this, but the chain of islands that branch off of Alaska, it stretches way out, right? Close to Russia, very close. It's actually pretty darn close to South Korea, which is another ally, and Japan's pretty darn close too. So those chain of islands stretch really far out, which is kind of shocking. Not many people really know that. But yeah, it was offered, it was brought up that, Alaska would be a state, and we actually purchased it from Russia for guess how much? Does anybody know? You guys talk about this in American history too? You should have. Maybe Mr. Henningers, I don't know. That was more than that. But it wasn't crazy amount. It was actually purchased really like cheap. We bought it from Russia for $7.2 million, which back in the 19 or 1860s, type that in. Let's find out. What is that in today's money? But anyway, it was a steal. It was a steal. No one could believe it. And they're like, why did we buy this though? It's way up there. It's not even connected to, right, continental United States. Right? What benefits does it have? Well, it has actually a lot of benefits. So rare earth minerals, ton of them. Oil, ton of it. Lumber, ton of it. And yeah, keep an eye out in Russia. Pretty good idea. Biggest thing too is that it booted out Russia from the Western Hemisphere. You guys ever hear of the Monroe Doctrine? Yeah, the whole Western Hemisphere will be ours. No one else. Get these European countries out. So that's pretty neat. All right. Hey, Texas, you're talking about Texas, Caden, right? So when it came to Texas, they were a republic. So it was his own independent country in a way before it joined the United States in 1845. It's the only country that joined, sorry, well, state that joined by a treaty instead of this regular process. So that's something interesting about Texas. West Virginia was created, a lot of it based off the free and slave states, when it came to this issue when it got to the Civil War. So Virginia, they wanted to join the Confederacy, hold on to slaves. And then the western part of it just broke off and said, no, we don't want to do that. So Free State was added, West Virginia. That's how it came about. So that was a little bit of a different way. And through this time period building up to the Civil War, a lot of states were added by twos through the state admission process because either they're going to be a free or slave state, right? So that's something interesting for the time period. And then finally, California. So California kind of skipped this territorial process, this state admission process, because the gold rush, right? And we get out there, establish it. And one big thing too, leading up to the Civil War, well, being a free state. So there you go. Is that neat? Is that neat? I think so. Um, yeah, so there are territories out there, which we'll talk about more tomorrow with Puerto Rico, Guam, um, when it comes to American Samoa, right? U.S. Virgin Islands. Okay. When it comes to Washington, D.C., it's kind of like this weird area, obviously, when it comes when it has votes in Congress or maybe becoming a state. That's obviously on for debate. A lot of people say that it should just become a state. Well, it was never designed to be a state. So anyway, is there any questions? State admission process? So as you can see, has every state gone through the state admission process? No, they haven't, right? A lot of states were just added because of certain circumstances, like Texas, right? And a lot of these states during Civil War and well, the 13 original colonies just became states, right? Obviously. So not all of them went through this admission process the same. But anyway, we do have one. So if we are maybe going to look at adding a territory, become a state, this is the process that it would have to follow. All right, you guys good? Yeah. All right, that's it.